And we're back. So, progress has been made. I've got several coats of newsprint in places, one in others. I've got these little things, which I'm hoping will stop this from drying onto the work surface. Obviously, I don't know if you can see in the video, but there's a lot of water glue all mixed here. All I've got left to do is kind of this and maybe this part. I'm not so concerned about the inside because that's not really going to be visible, so if it gets a little dinged up or a little smushed, I'm not so concerned. So all that's really left to do is kind of this edge and maybe that bottom edge. I think for that, short pieces are going to work better than long pieces. I've also discovered once you soak it, it's not a bad idea to kind of squeeze a little bit of the glue out. You want to make sure it stays wet enough because then it sticks a lot easier and wants less curling and things like that. And it looks like I'm going to have extra glue, so maybe I can put a top on this container and save that for my next attempt. For the most part, it seems to want to stay in the shape that I put it in. Sometimes you have to kind of push it a couple of times, but I'm hoping any mistakes I can just sand off and there won't be any issues, because the paper fiber should hopefully give this some strength. If you ever run into a spot where it's just kind of still sticking up, it might not be wet enough, so I've just been, dipping my fingers in there and then rubbing it on. I will tell you this though, it does take some time. I guess that's what I wanted though. I didn't want the speed requirement that the resin needs. I'm just hoping that this gives a halfway decent surface. I mean, obviously, the advantage of this is you don't need any special materials really. You don't need to use any weird or potentially toxic stuff. The glue is just like regular white glue. I mean, it's Weld Bond brand name. It says non-toxic right on the bottles, so I'm inclined to trust it. I think once I'm done this top lip, I'm not going to worry so much about the bottom. I'm trying to think, when that's on my shoulder on the costume, that's going to be kind of visible, but it's not going to be a high impact spot or a highly visible spot, so I might just kind of sand that smooth and then just leave this how I've got it. It's taking a bit longer than I kind of thought it would, but I guess when you're adding strip after strip of paper, like, I don't know why I wasn't expecting it to take a while. It's a vaguely therapeutic process, I don't know. It'll be more therapeutic if I find out, like tomorrow or something, that it's worked out and it's done exactly what I want. Then I'll say it's therapeutic. If I find out this was all a waste of time, I would call that not therapeutic. Kind of frustrating, like it was when I discovered my glue painting on wasn't the solution I was hoping it would be. I'm just sticking up a bit there, but if I really kind of press it down, it seems to stick. The table is a mess, so don't do this somewhere you don't have like a tarp down, or if you don't care about the work surface. It should just be able to be cleaned up with glue. With water to clean up the glue. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, why don't I just leave it here for the video as soon as I got this piece on. And I will cut to when, hopefully, I've had success and this is dried maybe tomorrow, maybe later today, but usually 24 hours drying is a better timeline. So then I will show you guys, hopefully, some success and what's happened and how the surface is and whether or not I think it's going to be doable. And then I'll probably put on another whole coat. I'm slightly worried about how heavy this is going to make it, because paper does add up. But if it works, then I don't think I need to worry about the copious amounts of glue that I already used. So that should help lighten things. But I guess we will see. So until tomorrow, I guess for you that's going to be instantly, because I'll just do a jump cut here. But for me, I get to spend 24 hours worrying that this has been a horrible mistake. So I will see you in a moment. Well, the paper mache is dry. It seems to all be sticking on, seems to have kind of kept the shape. I guess the issue might be it's going to kind of round things. Oops, well, I just managed to push through that. It's going to round things off a little, which isn't necessarily bad. I can make up for that either with painting or maybe just sanding through into it. Naturally, to make this kind of smooth and everything, I would have to sand it anyways, but with just one layer, it's not quite ready for that. So what I would want to do is probably put a second layer on this and then maybe try and sand it after that. I've mixed up some more of the glue water solution. I put a little more glue in than last time because maybe that'll make it better. I don't know. I'm still kind of flying by the seat of my pants, I guess. Just stirring it up, trying to make sure that there's not any big lumps of glue. Probably good enough. Still got plenty of strips of newsprint, thankfully. If not, shouldn't be too hard to get more. Junk mail is very common. I guess the question is, do I want to focus on getting the bottom here completely paper mached, or am I not as concerned about that? I don't think I'm as concerned about that, because this is probably one of the more solid bits. Same with this, because it should have the plastic still on the inside from when I did the slush casting inside. It's really just the rounded part where I was having issues because I needed to use that filler. So, again, it's not super exciting, but just kind of dip that through. I found if you sort of wring it out a bit, that helps. And then just stick it on. And press it down. Not quite sticking here. I don't know if that means I need more glue. Sticking here just fine though. The other problem is going to be figuring out where I've done multiple coats of the paper and where I haven't. It was easy before because if there wasn't paper there, I knew that I still needed to put paper there, but now there's paper everywhere. I can kind of see like where the wet strips are versus the dry strips, but I have a sneaking suspicion as this process goes on, it's going to become more difficult to figure that out because everything's going to get kind of wet. I guess I can just kind of try to go like in a row so that I can keep track of that. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be sticking quite as well as I would like it to. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just overthinking it. But yeah, this process is, of course, going to be just as boring as the previous part. And nothing new is really going to be gained from this part of the video. I just wanted to show you guys I was indeed putting on a second layer of newsprint. Plus any tips that I learned from the last time, which was basically wring it out. I don't know if I'm going to end up having to go to a third layer. My hope is that I don't, but I mean, the paper is pretty thin. I guess the other point to mention is that the surface does seem a bit more durable and harder than with just glue alone. Like, I can still score it with my fingernail, but it's a bit more difficult. So I'm hoping that this gives it a bit more rigidity and doesn't end up causing me grief like just the glue did. But I don't really have much more to add at this point. Just wanted to show you guys that it's still in process. Oh, and instead of using these things to try to keep it off of the table, I had some of these which work much better. They're meant for paint, but they definitely stop this from gluing itself to the table. So anyways, we'll jump ahead in time when I've actually got something more to show you, and hopefully it's interesting. So it's the next day. Everything appears to be dry. I'm not sure if it's an improvement or not. If I poke at it, it seems a little harder, but I think I was expecting more. Anyways, obviously the surface isn't exactly smooth anymore because we've got all the layers of paper. I'm going to take some sandpaper, 150 grit, and just do a little test. Yeah, that seems to work. The big test will be when I actually try and put like a paint on it to see if the lines show up. But let's just and there's some parts where it's just not as defined as I would like it to be, but maybe I can like file that or sand that a bit flatter or something. What I do think is that if I do this by hand, it's going to take forever. So what I might do is grab my mechanical sander and see if that speeds things up a bit. The sanding process itself is pretty straightforward. It's not going to be exciting to watch. So why don't I skip ahead until after this is sanded, and then we'll see what other observations I have about it. So I will jump cut over to that. And we're back. I sanded it all using my handy dandy mechanical sander. Made things a lot faster. The surface came out actually surprisingly smooth. I thought I might have to sand it more. There's still some spots, so I'll probably have to do it again. But I think what I'm going to do first is, because I'm still not 100% happy with how the surface feels, I think what I'm going to do is, I have leftover glue water mixture. I think I'm just going to take my paintbrush here and just paint a couple of coats of the mixture on here. So my hope is that this newsprint, now that it's all sanded and stuff, will absorb any of the extra glue and maybe kind of harden it up just a little bit more. I have no idea if that's how it's going to work. I am not a paper mache expert, as I have said. But it's not using any toxic materials. I'm sure sanding the newspaper, you might want to do that in a ventilated area, not where it's going to get super dusty, because I'm sure that's bad to breathe in. And I was able to do it slowly instead of having to rush like I do with the plastic resin. I'm really hoping that this has some appreciable difference. I guess I won't know probably until tomorrow when it finishes drying. There's also just a couple spots where, you know, the newspaper wasn't necessarily sticking how I would prefer it to. Hopefully this will stick it down a bit more. Also sure it's so exciting watching me slather this stuff on here. Like I said, the true test is going to be when I try to paint it, and we'll see if it actually paints very well. At least I don't think I'll have to worry about primer or anything, because I'm pretty sure that the paint will stick just fine to this surface. With the plastic resin, it's a bit more difficult because it doesn't really want the paint to stick to it, so I had to use some special kind of primer specifically for that plastic. It was a bit of a pain. It also wasn't cheap. Neither was the resin, whereas the newsprint I do get for free, basically. And the glue, not so expensive, and the water, again, really not a lot of cost associated with that. Alright, well, time to set this up to dry. Do a little bit of the bottom. It's always a bit of a balancing act. But I managed it. Then just get the bottom. Again, I'm not as concerned about the bottom. Depending on how ambitious I feel, I might even cut out like a piece of foam or something to put on the bottom, because that's going to be banging up against the costume more, so it might be better to have like a soft edge. Well, it looks like this stuff is getting absorbed, so here's hoping. Ideally, I would like it to come out as a very smooth finish, just so that the paint looks good on it, so that it looks, you know, a little bit of a disaster. So it looks similar to how this is pretty smooth and pretty glossy. So if I don't manage that, then I guess I can still always put a coat of plastic resin over top. I don't know. I feel like this is becoming so many different materials. But it's my first time doing something like this. Just trying to figure out what works best for me. Just like when you do it, I'm sure you'll try and figure out what works best for you. And hopefully some of these videos have helped. I feel like this particular video has gone for probably about as long as it should. So the next video, instead of just doing a jump cut, I'm going to make a second video. I'll show you the results of this when it dries. But in the meantime, see ya!